let's see if this works. Speaking to you from York University in Toronto, Canada. You can look, we're on the Great Lakes. I'm going to turn this screen. You can see we finally got some snow. I look out over this awesome woodlot that is named after a biology professor. And let's get started. Debbie, are we good? Can everyone hear me? Excellent. So I'm here to tell you about how plants deal with the fact that they cannot run away. And what you can see here are just photos of the many students that I've worked with over the last few decades, since it's nearly 30 years that I've been working on the particular plant defense. So you can see these are a ton of my colleagues and students. But before I get started in explaining about plant defenses, I want to remind everybody what ecology is and what ecologists do. Before we talk about herbivory, that's like vegetarians in the animal world, and we talk about how they defend themselves against being eaten. So what you can see in this photograph here is a bunch of students and a visiting professor in my lab a couple of months ago, and they're actually counting tiny brine shrimp because we are putting these brine shrimp into little test tubes, and we are adding extracts from grasses that have got toxins or poisons in them that we've extracted, and we're testing to see how lethal they are to these poor little brine shrimp in this bioassay. So we're counting things. But I know that all of you are really familiar with the textbook definitions of what is ecology. So I've pulled a couple out here. The scientific study of the interactions between organisms and their environment, or the study of the abundance and distribution of organisms. And that's sort of, everyone tells me that when I say, what is ecology? But it doesn't really tell us what ecologists do, or the question that drives me every day when I get up and I'm doing research, what's the question in my mind? So really, what ecologists are asking is, why are there so many individuals of that penguin over there? You can see this really bad photo of penguins at the Boston Aquarium from a few years ago. They have this huge penguin habitat, and I had no idea how many penguins there were there. You could see them being fed, you could see them swimming, there were different species, and I spent a lot of my time trying to figure out about how many penguins there were, what was the population in the Boston Aquarium. So how many of an animal or plant or a fungus or a bacteria are there living in a particular place? And here's the thing. We're really interested in understanding whether the population size is going up, down, or staying the same, and why that is. So if anybody asks you what you did today, you go, well, there was like this ecology professor from Toronto in Canada, and she was telling us she's an ecologist, and someone says, well, what's an ecologist? You could just say they're people that count things. They count organisms. It really is that simple. But there's a lot of math and computers and stuff in behind that. But essentially, that is what we do. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of people are really good at explaining what DNA is or RNA is and a double helix, they get that down pat. That's really good. But when it comes to ecology, part of the problem with ecology is that it's operating at like different scales and levels. So you could look at the ecology of a population over 6 weeks, or over 6 years, or over 60 years, or you could look at the ecology of a population on a tree, it living inside a tree, which is its habitat. 50% of all organisms live inside or on another organism. They don't live in the physical world that we inhabit. Or you could look at the ecology of that system across an entire forest, or across the boreal region, or across the forests of the eastern United States. There's just a lot going on in ecology at the same time. And really what ecology is looking at are these top two pictures. You can see down at the bottom, we've got the molecular level, the DNA, the organelles, the different levels of organization. We've got the digestive system of the tiger. Then we have the tiger, and we have the tiger in its habitat. So that's really where ecology is concerned. But often we have to speak to biochemists and molecular biologists and geneticists to help us understand the patterns that we think we're seeing in the real world. And then, of course, you will all have learned about interactions, the interaction slide. We have competitive interactions, predation, parasitism, mutualism, detritivory, that's organisms that eat and digest dead stuff. And the pluses and minuses that you can see in the brackets here after the interaction type are really telling us whether there is a winner or a loser. And in this photograph, which is taken in a forest just outside of Toronto, we can see these beautiful three-lobed hepatica plants, which if you're living in the northeastern United States, you might have seen these. They have the most gorgeous flowers. But what you can see here is a lot of these leaves have chunks taken out of them. So they've been preyed upon, but the entire leaf isn't eaten because a herbivore is feeding on them. So probably some kind of insect. This wouldn't be a deer, because if it was a deer eating that leaf, it would take the whole leaf. There wouldn't be these little bites taken out. So we've got two kinds of organisms in the world, the autotrophs and the heterotrophs. And I'm hoping that everybody looking at this picture of this polar bear will tell me that that's the heterotroph. And then, of course, the autotrophs are all those green willow bushes. So this is the polar bear on the land in the summer in the place on Hudson Bay in northern Canada, where I spent 5 summers studying grasses. And sometimes my experiments got eaten by a polar bear. Okay, carrying on then. So that's just a reminder for everyone here about ecology. We just, basically I go out and I count things, and it is harder than it sounds. So herbivores are a particular kind of predator. They could be a deer, they could be a rabbit, they could be an insect like these sort of weevily things in this rose, chomping through the rose. They could be a bird like a goose. And this photo on the bottom right, we could see a tiny fence that is separating on the left, the area being grazed by a lesser snow goose, and on the right, we've kept the snow goose out. This is in the subarctic, and you can see there's lots of flowers, yellow flowers in there, and on the left, not a whole lot, because those herbivorous geese are eating everything that they can get to. So a herbivore will have a lot of different prey items in its lifetime. It won't, it'll like take nibbles here and there. It will eat plants, the leaves, the twigs, the roots, the seeds. Basically, they're vegetarians. And herbivores don't eat the entire plant usually. They just eat like a leaf or a twig at a time. And so that means that over a short period of time, their prey, the plant or the bush or the tree, won't die. But if you get enough of the leaves eaten or enough of the twigs eaten, eventually the plant will die because it can't produce its leaves, it can't do its photosynthesis, it just can't get the food it needs from sunlight. Okay. So this is where plants have developed and evolved anti-herbivore defenses. And there's a bunch of different kinds. So I'm guessing that the one that most people will think of would be spines on cacti or thorns on roses. These physical defenses that just make an animal that might be thinking of eating that plant back away. Just, oh, not going to try and eat you. I'm going to find this other plant, like this really nice lettuce or something like that, or kale, which is so easy to get to the leaves. Delicious, fantastic. I'm going to eat that instead of this great cactus because I have to pick out all of the spines of the cactus. So that's one kind of what we call a physical plant defense. Then there's another kind of defense. Plants can use the sugars that photosynthesis makes and combine them with other molecules to make poisons and toxins. So that's kind of why when you go out into the woods, we usually say, don't eat everything that you see unless you know it's edible, because it could be poisonous. And it turns out plants make hundreds and hundreds and thousands of these different kinds of poisonous chemicals. And there's a whole bunch of different groups of them. So poison ivy, for example, is synthesizing some compounds that if you get these oily compounds on your skin, they'll be like a nasty, nasty reaction. Other plants, like giant hogweed, if you touch them and you get the sap that comes out of the plant on your skin and then you expose it to the sunlight, there'll be a reaction which causes blistering. It won't be very good. And people who get this in their mouths can get horrible blisters in their mouths. What else? Some plants even produce cyanide gas. They actually don't produce the gas all the time, but if a little caterpillar comes along and chews the leaves, then all the ingredients come together, and before you know it, there's like cyanide gas, which is totally poisonous, being given off. And we've actually been doing some labs in my undergraduate, I think it would be sophomore year, second year, where we've been actually testing some plants that grow in our greenhouse that make cyanide, and you can actually have a really simple little test to test. So I'm looking at the wrong thing. For the camera's over here, for cyanide. Okay, now, so you can get spines, thorns, physical defenses to ward off the animals that want to eat you, the herbivores. You can be poisonous and deter them that way. Or if the plant doesn't really have the machinery to make toxic, poisonous chemicals inside it, compounds, it can actually phone a friend. And that's what I'm going to be telling you about today, is the plants that actually have managed to evolve a symbiotic relationship with an invisible defender. Before we go on to that, though, I just want to mention that there is actually a fourth option that plants living in very rich habitats can actually do to overcome being eaten. They can simply grow so many leaves so rapidly that they just kind of wipe out the effects of the few leaves that are gone. So there is leaf removal, but not so much that the plant can't recover from it. And that's like another whole area having to do with grasslands. That's a topic for another day. It's like the prairies and how those particular plants, the grasses, have evolved to tolerate being grazed by bison and so on. Okay, so chemical defenses. Most people here know that cigarette smoking, I hope, is bad for your health. It's not a good thing at all. And tobacco, which is the plant you can see here, they actually used to grow a lot of it where I am in Toronto, just to the southwest of here. And it has a chemical in it called nicotine. And it turns out that one of the main benefits of the plant, the tobacco plants having this nicotine, is that in seedlings, which have higher levels of nicotine production, they are less likely to get eaten by caterpillars and other bugs, and they're more likely to survive and go on to grow into an adult plant. So that is, there's just so many. Oh, and here I've got hot chocolate. This has got the alkaloid from plants, caffeine. So we get chocolate from cocoa beans, and it's got this alkaloid, which is caffeine, which can have a very waking up effect on people like me. Caffeine is also in coffee, it's also in tea, and that's one of the reasons why we like to drink these things. So I'm doing hot chocolate today. Okay, so this is where I'm going to now jump off into that third kind of plant defense. It's called the phone a friend strategy. So what you can see in this picture is a whole bunch of grass. You know, look out your window, you're going to see grass. But, and a lot of animals, a lot of cows and sheep and horses will eat this grass. And in the last hundreds to thousands of years, every now and again, a whole bunch of sheep and horses and cows in a field, they would just die. And it was this really big mystery. Greeks and ancient Romans would report this happening. You'd have these horses, they're happily in a field, they're eating the grass, and suddenly a bunch of them just keel over. Wow, what was doing this? So it actually turns out that the reason for these mysterious deaths of sheep and horses and cows was only really discovered and confirmed about 30 years ago. So in the 1980s. So when some of you, your parents would have been quite young. And I was a student doing my PhD in Oxford University in England, and a professor came back. He had been in the United States, been in America for a conference, and he knew that I was studying sheep grazing for my PhD and how sheep tell the difference between the better grass to eat and the less good grass. The dark green grass, higher protein, the lighter green grass, not so good. Turns out sheep are really smart and they're really good at telling the difference between different kinds of grass. And this professor came to me, he said, aren't you testing all your grasses for this invisible fungus that appears to be the cause of some of these mysterious livestock illnesses? And I said, no. And he said, I've just heard about this. I just discovered this. I've been at this conference. So I got very worried and I went away and I read up about this, and I discovered that if you look at the picture I think it'll be to your right of the grass here, what you can see here is the inside of a grass leaf. And there's a tiny blue thread that is running through that leaf. And that is a fungus. And that is a totally invisible fungus that nobody knew anything about for literally hundreds and thousands of years. And that fungus is inside the grass that the cows and the horses are eating. But when that fungus wants to get to another grass plant, what it does is it grows up into the grass flower, into the grass seed, and you can see a whole bunch of grass seeds here in this picture. And then, and I can see that my arrows didn't translate onto this because this is like a life cycle here going around. And in this other picture of this kind of squash, the one on the bottom left, that's actually the inside of a seed. It hasn't yet germinated. It's got the embryo. If you plant it, it'll grow into a new grass plant. And then you can see those weird little thready things around. That's actually the living fungus. And when the grass seedling grows from the seed, that fungus is going to grow into what we call the dorsoplant. This was like a totally mind-blowing discovery. Okay, so where does this fungus come from? Well, a lot of you have probably seen moldy bread or mushrooms and things growing in the wood. So, there's a lot of fungus and mold out there. And a lot of that is, they're often diseases on plants. And this picture here, which is from the University of Kentucky, my colleague Chris Shardle, who his lab has done a lot of the breakthrough work on this grass fungus friendship. You can actually see on the left-hand grass here, I hope, the this is a relative and an ancestor of this invisible fungus living inside the grass, and it is seen on the outside of the flower. So it's grown into the flower. The flower isn't developing. This poor grass flower, it's not doing very well. And you got this like fungus, and this fungus is going to make spores, and those spores are going to blow out into the wind, and they're going to get onto another plant or grass, and they're going to get into it, and they're going to inhabit it, and it'll become diseased. The grass on the right is just a regular grass flower. It actually has a relative of that fungus in it. And that fungus is not going to produce these external spores. You're never even going to know it's in there because it's just going to hide inside the seed. Cool and amazing because of what that fungus actually does. There's a molecule here. There's like a whole bunch of carbon rings, and you can see some nitrogen and stuff like that. It turns out that what that fungus is doing inside of that grass is it's making poisons for the grass that will affect these poor sheep. Here this is from Utah, because we did some interesting experiments where we took grass from Scotland down to Utah to find out if their test sheep could actually tell whether grass has this invisible fungus in it. You can see Fred Provenza and one of his students. He's now retired. I missed seeing him in California this week. It turns out that these ergovaline, they're called ergot alkaloids, that these fungi make inside the grass, can have sublethal effects. That means they don't really kill you; they just make you really sick if you eat them. And they can, if there's enough of those toxins that build up, they'll actually kill the cows and the sheep and the horses. So this discovery that really innocent looking grass, maybe not so innocent if you're a caterpillar or a sheep, was a big thing in the 1980s. And a lot of research happened, most of it in agriculture and farms, because people were planting pasture grasses that grew really well, because it turns out that this fungus, in exchange for getting a home inside the grass, the fungus helps its grass host to grow more vigorously. It's like a symbiotic relationship, and both partners benefit from this. So there was these amazing pasture grasses that were developed in the 1980s, and lots of farmers planted them across the southeastern US and into the Midwest, and they were making the cattle sick, because what was making the grass grow really strong and with great vitality, and it could tolerate drought, they were like super grasses, was actually this fungus. And it seemed that sometimes the fungus would grow to a point where the animals were getting really sick. So this is an issue that has been managed now for the last 30, 40 years. Okay. I don't quite know what happened there. Let's see if I can. Okay. I should stop here and ask, are there any questions so far? I've actually lost my screen here, Debbie. Trying to see. So excuse me, everyone. I'm having a bit of a technical issue here. Let me see if I can. Okay. How do I get this smaller? Sorry, guys. Can everyone see In a minute. Can I just get some idea? I'm having trouble seeing my screen. I just go back. Okay, let me see if I do this. That help. Ah, I think I did it. Sorry, hang on a minute. Okay. Okay, I'm going to carry on now. Okay, everyone, I think I've got enough of this. Responding. Let me try one more, then I'm going to carry on. Sorry about this. Okay, just go with that. Okay, right. So for me, when I wanted to try and figure out whether these grasses with these super duper invisible fungi that seem to be poisonous at times were actually important in the ecology of grazing animals other than cows and horses and sheep on farms, what I did was go to the wettest and windiest place in Britain, and I hope everyone can see this. These islands here, let's see. Just go back here. So what you can see here are photos of the St. Kilda Islands. And these islands are off the west coast of Scotland. People lived there for a really long time. It was kind of a miserable place to be living. They would often eat the seabirds like the puffins on the cliffs. And they also kept sheep. But because the islanders were very unhealthy, they actually were really starving in some years. They actually asked to be evacuated in the 1930s, and they took their domestic white sheep with them, like you think of sheep with woolly white coats on a farm, and they left behind these little sheep here that you can see. These are called Soay sheep. They are an early breed. They're thought to have been brought to these islands by the Vikings. So you can see here, this is where St. Kilda is. It is where that red pin is. It's pretty isolated, kind of in the Atlantic Ocean. And the sheep that got left behind, these sort of wild sheep, were very interesting because there were no predators, there was no wolves or foxes to eat them, but the population would go up and down and up and down. You can see after the islanders left, the few Soay sheep that got left behind, the population builds up and then it starts to zigzag around. And on the right hand side, you can see the grass that we study in my lab, which is all over the island and which the sheep eat. And we wanted to figure out whether this invisible fungus was in there and whether it was having any effect. So what you can see here is a breakdown of the islands. So we've got this main island called Herta, which is where the houses were and where the people lived. And then next door to Herta is this little island called Doon. And there's never been any sheep on this island. So we said, well, there were no herbivores ever eating that grass, so let's see, maybe it doesn't need to have the defense against being eaten if there's just a few slugs and really no sheep. So we did some experiments where we just went on the island and we counted stuff. we kept pieces of grass and we collected it, and we looked to see with a microscope whether there was a difference between the two islands in terms of how much of the grass had this invisible fungus in it. And it did actually turn out that if you were a grass plant on the grazed island, you were much more likely to actually have the fungus in use. So 56 grasses of 56 grass plants on the grazed island, 84% of them had the fungus in them, and of 50 grasses on the ungrazed island, 24%. So that could have been because of the slugs. So there could be reasons for that. Okay. Oh, this didn't translate. Okay, so I want to just remind everyone that what we're talking about here is a three-way relationship. We've got our herbivores, which would be, in this case, sheep. We've got our grasses. I had a whole bunch of nice emojis and they haven't translated. That's too bad. And then we've got a fungus. The fungus is in the grass, and the grass is giving the fungus shelter and giving it food, and the fungus is making lots of poisons. The herbivore eats the grass. If it eats too much of the grass, it gets really sick, and then it doesn't eat the grass. But what about the herbivore and the fungus? Is there a relationship between the herbivore and the fungus? Does the herbivore even know that the fungus is there? And does the fungus have any reaction to the herbivore? So we did a whole bunch of experiments where we asked, maybe if you bite the grass, that somehow gets the fungus to produce more poison. And all you need to see when you look at these figures is that in grass plants that have the fungus, because some of them can lose the fungus, you can, over time they can lose it. If you cut it, the ergovaline, the alkaloid, goes way high. So in this pair of scissors, you can see there's a bump up in how poisonous that grass is. And if you cut plants that have got the fungus 1, 2, 4, 8 times, they get bumped up as well. Biting grass makes the fungus produce more poison. And then we needed to find out whether the sheep could tell the difference between the unpoisonous and the poisonous grass. And now I want to ask everybody to remember getting a stomachache. And if eating any food ever made you feel ill. So basically, we had to take all our Scottish grass that we had brought to Canada and grow in Toronto. We put it all in the back of a van, and we drove a lot of it down to Utah State University, where we grew it and we fed it to their sheep that are these very smart sheep that they use to tell whether plants are poison, experiments to tell whether plants are poisonous or not. So how do you ask a sheep if something is making it sick? Okay, my sheep emojis really didn't go through. Okay, so if you've ever eaten something that gave you a stomachache or made you feel ill, and you look at that food again, often you'll go, ugh, that's just making me feel ill, or you get the taste of something and you really don't like it and it makes you super sick, and you just feel nauseous every time you see that food. So this is basically how we trick the sheep. We give them something called lithium chloride, and if you give the lithium chloride to the sheep with different kinds of food, and then you take away, and it kind of makes them feel sick to their stomach, then when you give them the food, they'll have learn to associate that food with something that tastes bad. So this is basically what you can see here is these poor sheep. They've been fed some grass with the fungus, without the fungus, depending on what we're doing, and then they're being given like a pill to make them feel ill. And you can do this, and you can do all kinds of what are called paired grass feeding trials. And then you can give them the food without the thing that makes them feel ill. And like the next day, a couple of days afterwards, what you can see where the star is, the food that the sheep avoids the most is the grass that has got the fungus in it, that has got other things to make them feel ill, these alkaloids. So really what we managed to show is that a grass plant that looks identical to us tastes and feels very different to sheep. Sheep can actually tell what's there. And you might ask, why does the sheep keep eating the grass? Because it's kind of hungry. Like, animals will eat things that will make them feel ill, even though they would prefer to avoid them. Sometimes you have no choice. Which brings me to the final part of my little presentation, and then we'll take some questions here, I hope, about plant defenses. We were really interested in whether there was more to the relationship between the fungus and the animals that are eating it. And a couple of years ago, we published a paper where we collected spit. And this is where, like, we get into the whole saliva thing. So, you know, when you go to the dentist and they put the thing in your mouth, and it kind of sucks out that tube, and it sucks out the your spit as your teeth are being cleaned. Well, we got a hold of a bunch of moose spit, and we got a hold of a bunch of reindeer spit. And we took the fungus out from inside the grass, and we grew it on little petri plates. You can see a fungus colony. You can actually get it out. It grows very slowly. It really needs its grass to do well. And then what we did was we started dripping drops of spit from different grazing animals that would be exposed to these grasses with this fungus. And we measured to see how fast or slow the fungus grew on a petri plate. You can see we're just like measuring the expansion of this circle of fungus. And here's some results. And basically what the results actually show is that after you drip spit onto the fungus that you got out of the grass, it gets pretty slow in its growth. So over to the right-hand side, after 50 hours, if you just drip water or you drip reindeer spit, caribou spit, actually it doesn't really slow the fungus down that much. But moose, which would be exposed to these grasses, if they spit on the fungus, it really slows the fungus down. So what we start to see is that there's this relationship between the fungus and the animal that is eating the grass with the fungus. So it's kind of interesting here. The other thing that happens when you put the spit on the fungus is it makes less of the poison. So you start to see a drop. Spit is pretty good. Like, our mouths actually have a lot of cool stuff in them that is designed as a first line of defense against poisonous things and bacteria that come into our mouth. So saliva is pretty cool. So one of the things that we wanted to ask, and this is where I'm going to wind up, and we can talk about, take some questions, is herbivore spit, grazing animal spit, special? And when we published this research, I have to say, we discovered that there was beer being made in Montana called moose drool, and people started sending me empty bottles of moose spit. So, beer. It was kind of weird and interesting because they just thought this was so cool. So I got a lot of these bottles sent to me. So here's the most recent experiment that we did in my lab a year ago with some undergraduate students. And what we did was we got different kinds of spit. We got human spit. That's the orange. We got dog spit. That's the yellow. And we got a bunch of different kinds of cow spit. Getting spit from different animals is really difficult. You have to kind of work with zoos and pet owners, and we're really getting tiny, tiny, tiny amounts because you're trying to get animals to like drool onto glasses and plates and then collect it up. So that's been quite interesting, trying to get a spit bank. But what we really were surprised to see was it did really matter. The spit from the cows, from the grazing animals, were what slowed down the growth of the fungus on these petri plates. So you can see these gray lines and these blue lines. After 72 to 96 hours, the growth of the fungus exposed to that kind of spit is way slower than the fungus exposed to distilled water or dog or human spit. Okay, so I'm going to wind up here and I'm going to hopefully get a good discussion going with the students and the teachers about plant defenses. Let me see, I think I have another slide here. And if you do need to get in touch with me, you can always tweet me at Dawn Bazely. Okay, let me see if I can get some questions from people. And I hope you enjoyed that. Okay. I'm hoping there'll be some questions. It's bigger. In the text box. Okay, Debbie, I'm looking in the text box and I'm not seeing any questions. Am I missing the text box? Okay, maybe I missed questions. Sorry, I might have missed them. Okay, why am I not seeing? Am I in the wrong text box? Okay, let me see. Ah, yes, Kenyon, I can see this. Ah, I'm seeing lots of questions. Right, let's deal with these. Okay, thank you. Oh, Kenyon says, love the title of the slides. Ha ha, thank you. I'm glad you can see and hear me. Here's a, should it be defenses or defenses? In my defense, I grew up in England, so you are getting British spelling. So defense and defense. So that's what you're seeing is you're getting different spellings because of where I grew up. So when I write program, I always give it an extra M. Okay. Play on words. Can't wait about plants. Keenan can hear you. What is RNA? So DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA. Ooh, what does RNA stand for? I taught this morning. Is it the co-browser again? Co-browser. Okay, no, I think I'm okay. RNA, who can tell me what RNA? Oh, I look it up in the textbook. Here we have my favorite textbook of all time, which is my plant biology textbook. I love it. Can't remember what RNA stands for. It's because I'm trying to remember these secondary compounds. Oh, ribonucleic acid. That's it. Okay, more questions. Oh, this is an excellent question. Difference between spines and thorns. Huge difference. I'm going to see if I can get the co-browser to work. What come out here? Oh, thank you, ribonucleic acid. Yes. Okay. Spines and thorns. Okay. A spine on a cactus is actually, the ancestor was a leaf. A thorn is a modified branch, and a prickle is just like something that comes out of the stem. So being, here, because I'm a plant biologist, I have like dead plants all around me. Oh, right. Can't really see them on here. I normally have things with prickles, but basically there's different ways to get, and I need to look here, sorry, different ways to get adaptations that can function in a defensive way. Of course, the ultimate defense on thorny acacia trees is that the thorns grow hollow, and then armies of ants actually live inside these hollow thorns. And when a giraffe or some other big herbivore goes to eat the acacia tree, you get like these ants just like swarm out, or if there's insects, and they swarm all over to defend the plant. That's pretty cool. Okay, how does nicotine help in seedlings? Basically, nicotine is toxic, and the seedlings that have got higher levels of nicotine are not eaten. So if like a caterpillar comes along and takes a bite out of a little seedling leaf, it's just like, ew, and then it just moves on to another seedling that doesn't have such high levels. Okay. Okay, other questions? Okay, why moose spit? When we were interested in saliva, we did know, well, we knew two things. One, a friend of mine in Sweden, she did the coolest experiment with moose spit, because moose are browsers and they eat twigs, and they also drool a lot. Is anybody, like, if you've ever been on a farm or you see a horse, there's like a lot of drool that's just coming out of the mouth. And so my friend Margareta did an experiment going on 20 years ago where she grew a whole bunch of little tree saplings. This is in Sweden. And she wanted to see if that saliva was having any impact on the growth of the little bushes. And she painted it on. She got a hold of moose saliva. She discovered that the bushes that had the moose saliva on them produced twigs. They grew in a different way. So we kind of knew from the research literature and our friend Margareta that moose saliva and moose eat grass as well. So we thought, if we're going to test the saliva of a herbivore based on what's already published in the scientific literature, let's try moose, because we already know it does stuff to sapling trees and stuff. Okay, another question. Is this an example of coevolution? We definitely know that the fungus in the grass is an example of coevolution. The extent to which the spit and the fungus is an example of coevolution, we have no idea. The discovery that we made that got published about 2-3 years ago now is so new that we don't even know what the ingredient in the spit is that is slowing down the alkaloid poison production. We just don't know. This is a brand new area of research, and we've been trying to figure out how to do it in my lab, and I've been speaking to my friends who are biochemistry professors. And the biggest problem that we have right now is getting enough spit to do like some basic biochemistry and looking at the biochemical composition of what's going on. It's really hard just to get enough spit. This is spit limited research. Okay. Oh, Kenyon, is the nicotine um, addictive? Probably not at that level. No, I don't think so. I think it just if you spray nicotine um, on insects or they're exposed to it, it'll kill them. It'll kill them. They'll be dead. They're not going to come back for more. Okay, let me see. Canton is asking, what inspired me to study defenses? Yeah, I've done a lot of stuff with thorns and spines. I think it's so cool. Plants can't run away. How do they defend themselves? They've got to do something original, and this is really what they do. When I teach plant defenses in my biology courses, I'm teaching about something called secondary compounds. Primary compounds in plant cells would be sugars, proteins, DNA, RNA, the stuff that is found in every cell. People have known about alkaloids and terpenes, all these compounds, for hundreds of years, for a long time, that they were called secondary compounds. And people thought, well, they didn't really have any role. They really weren't doing anything. They were like making a plant smell nice or be a certain color. But nah, they weren't found everywhere in the plant, just some parts of the plant. And about 30 years ago, the ecology research showed that these secondary compounds, in fact, were playing all kinds of ecology research showed that these secondary compounds, in fact, were playing all kinds of defensive roles. So I guess I was a student when all these new functions for these so-called secondary, not primary compounds were being discovered, and people have been trying to figure out just all the different roles that they play. So it's endlessly fascinating. So that's why I do it, because there's always something new to discover. I mean, it's amazing to me that in my lab at York University, we're actually discovering brand new stuff like spit affects the alkaloids in this fungus that until 30 years ago, no one even knew it was in these grasses that cows were eating, and they were dying sometimes. Okay, right. Okay, I guess we're winding up now. Thank you for your amazing questions and for listening, and sorry about the glitches. Oh, Kenyon says he has wait, says wait. Do you have another question? Okay, look, waiting for three, says three questions coming. Awesome. Oh, mechanical defenses, sorry. Oh, okay, great. So mechanical defenses, why are they called mechanical defenses? Because they're physical and mechanical, and you can kind of, they actually kind of push away animals. So when you look at a giraffe trying to eat the leaves on an acacia, it's having to like navigate these thorns. If you get stuck, if you've ever been stuck in the middle of a bunch of thorny bushes, you know that like getting your way out, or you get stuck onto prickles and spines, it's like you have to move your coat to get out. I've ripped a lot of coats studying these things. Well, thank you for listening. And remember, next time you look at the grass growing in your lawn, there's a whole bunch of stuff living inside it, and it's doing weird stuff. Thank you, Deb. It was a pleasure. I'm so excited to have participated. And thank you to all the students. And by the way, can I just quick plug? I actually have a high school student who has adapted some of the work we're doing with brine shrimp to see if plants are poisonous. She's doing it for her grade 9, that's junior year high school science fair project in Toronto. So we actually have students doing citizen science high school projects on some of this stuff. Okay, Kenyon says, last couple of minutes, were there any defenses that seem impossible? Could you, how do you mean impossible? Could you clarify that? Explain a little bit more. Defenses that seem impossible? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Hoping Kenyon will type a little bit more so I can answer that last question. Oh, Kenyon. Oh, Kenyon Woods Middle School. Oh, hi. I'm just suddenly realizing. I've got EHS Biology, Canton Garden, Elizabeth Hagen. Oh, hi. Hi, everyone. Relatively fast movement. You mean in plants? Yeah, I hope this is a good answer. Okay. A plant, when it gets its energy, it has to decide what to do with those sugars from photosynthesis. Do I use it to grow and make a new leaf, or do I use it to put into defenses? These structural or physical defenses, if you grow a whole bunch of spines and thorns, you're kind of saying, you know, I hope I need to use these defenses. And then if the giraffes don't come around, you've got all these spines and thorns and you don't really need them, but you've invested energy in them. So the chemical defenses are inducible, so they are more mobile. And one of the things that we can certainly see is really rapid response. So a plant, if it suddenly gets attacked, it can mobilize some of these defenses and get defended pretty quickly. And if it's not being eaten by sheep or cows, then it can use that energy and resources to grow some new leaves or make some flowers. I hope that explains that. It can happen very quickly. So biochemical defenses are more flexible than structural physical defenses like thorns and spines. Okay, everyone, I guess it will be time for you all to have a break soon. Thank you for having me. And I just look forward to maybe meeting some citizen scientists in Toronto, in Canada one day. Come visit us at York if you're ever up this way.